on Monday that to remind us to come for the second shot next week. So,
oh, how wonderful. Yay.
Yeah.
I've got my second shot, or we have our second shots coming up on Saturday.
Yeah, that's very good. Now, here's the thing, and you guys know better than me. They said now clergy is going to be moved up to like 1B or something like that. So but we still can't go until they call us, right?
No, you got to try to, as long as you fit the credentials, you got to try to make an appointment through some way. We made ours through Kaiser. UC Health is taking appointments, etc.
What you need to do, Rabbi, is get on as many lists as you possibly can.
Yeah, I know, but here's the deal. First of all, I am on the Kaiser list, but I know some people are like driving like 45 minutes or an hour to an appointment back and forth. A, I don't want to cut a line, and B, my schedule's tight, man. I don't have 45 minutes to be driving for a shot. So the Kaiser's just down on Arapahoe. I can get to it, God willing. But I'm on the Kaiser list. It's just,
By the way, today's Groundhog Day, and Ponce Phil, the beaver, he came out and said, "Where can I get a shot?"
Every day's been Groundhog Day.
Right.
The last 11 months.
For the last year, yeah.
Right. So we're going to get 6 more weeks of spring.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll. I know that some people have to get off early for Ali. That's wonderful, and so I want to say hello to Arnie and to Wendy and Barbara, and welcome everybody. We have an interesting class. I hope it's interesting. I found it interesting in putting it together. So if you don't find it, don't bust my bubble.
Okay.
In the 18th chapter of the book of Exodus, this week's Torah portion, Yitro, it's named after the father-in-law of Moses, sometimes called Jethro, but I can't say Jethro without thinking of the Beverly Hillbillies, so I'm not going to say Jethro. But, so Yitro is going to be coming to Moses, and they have this wonderful interaction. And that's what I wanted to focus on. Later on, of course, in this Torah portion, chapter 20 is the 10 Commandments, the first giving of the 10 Commandments. There's another version of it in the book of Deuteronomy. So I wanted to focus on this piece because it brings up the integration of those who were not born Jewish, those who were, had a different faith or different culture, and who became a part of our people, but not only became a part of our people, but became an extraordinary blessing to our people. And so I thought that was an interesting piece. And I was thinking of it especially because this week, this past week, I was with the Introduction to Judaism class. That's our vehicle, 28 weeks, 2 hours every Thursday for those who are interested in becoming Jewish. And I taught it this past week. It was an overview of Judaism, intense from God, Torah, and Israel, breakout groups, and it was wonderful. And in another week and a half, I'll be with Yossi Serebransky, the Chabad rabbi, as well as a conservative rabbi, Rabbi Solomon. And we'll be doing branches of Judaism to talk about Orthodoxy, Reform, and conservative. And so, not everyone is aware of the process of becoming Jewish, but I think everyone is aware of the blessings that we have had by those who have chosen to join us. And so I thought that was a perfect lesson for today. And you don't think that, we wanted to talk about the whole idea of revelation and what did it mean, revelation, and what happened at Sinai and what was this 10 Commandments all about? Don't worry, because on Thursday, I have the Lunch and Learn, and we will talk about the phenomena of revelation, of how it was experienced, the controversy as to what it was that Moses heard that the children of Israel heard as to how we are trying to understand that this God who's not material, not a being, communicates to humans. And what was that experience at Sinai? You'd be surprised what some of the classic interpretations of Midrashim have to say about it, as well as some modern philosophers. So I want to get to that on Thursday. Again, it won't be going through what the 10 Commandments say. We know. I want to go to, how do we know something happened at Sinai? What do we think happened at Sinai, if anything? So that'll be on Thursday. So with that, let's go ahead and say a bracha and do a little bit of study. Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam,
asher
asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Praise are you, Adonai, our God, creator of the universe, who've sanctified us with mitzvot. You've commanded us to engage with words of Torah. So with that, before I plow in real quick, any other thoughts? No thoughts. Okay, good. Okay, so what I want to do this time is, I know sometimes we go back and forth with it. I want to read all of chapter 18 first, and then we're going to pause, write down some of the questions and thoughts that you had going through this text, and then get to the commentary. Okay? So with that, I'm going to employ the Alan Markman rule.
Thank you very much.
Is that big enough?
Yes, thank you. Wow.
I know, 150%. All right, Mr. Markman, why don't you go for it?
Yitro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people. How Adonai had brought Israel out of Egypt. So Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after she had been sent home, and her 2 sons, of whom one was named Gershom, that is to say, I have been a stranger in a foreign land, and the other is named Eliezer, meaning the God of my father was my help, and he delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought Moses' son and wife to him in the wilderness, where he was encamped at the mountain of God. He sent word to Moses, your father-in-law Yitro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons.
And her 2 sons.
Her 2 sons, yes. Moses went out to meet his father-in-law. He bowed low and kissed him. Each asked after the other's welfare, and they went into the tent. Moses then recounted to his father-in-law everything that Adonai had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardships that had been befallen them on the way, and how Adonai had delivered them. And Yitro rejoiced over all the kindness that Adonai had shown Israel when he delivered them from Egyptians. Blessed be Adonai, Yitro said, who delivered you from the Egyptians and from Pharaoh, and who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that Adonai is greater than all gods, yes, by the result of their very schemes against the people. And Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with the elders of Israel to partake of the meal.
Before God.
To partake of the meal before God with Moses' father-in-law. The next day, Moses sat as magistrate among the people, while the people stood about Moses from morning until evening. But when Moses' father-in-law saw how much he had to do for the people, he said, "What is this thing that you're doing to the people? Why do you act alone? Why all the people stand about you from morning until evening?" Moses replied to his father-in-law, "It is because the people come to me and to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, it comes before me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make known the laws and teachings of God." But Moses' father-in-law said to him, "The thing you are doing is not right. You will surely wear yourself out, and these people as well, for the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Now listen to me. I will give you counsel, and God be with you. You represent the people before God. You bring the disputes before God, and enjoin upon them the laws and the teachings, and make known to them the way they are to go and the practice they are to follow. out from among all the people capable men who fear God, trustworthy men who spurn ill-gotten gain, set these over them as chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Let them judge the people at all times. Have them bring every major dispute to you, decide every minor dispute themselves. Make it easier for yourself by letting them share burden with you. If you do this, and God so commands you, you will be able to bear up, and all these people too will go home unwearied. Moses heeded his father-in-law and did just as he said. Moses chose capable men out of all of Israel and appointed them heads over the people, chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. And they judged the people at all times. The difficult matters they would bring to Moses, and all the minor matters they would decide themselves. Then Moses bade his father-in-law farewell, and he went his way to his own land.
Okay, I know it's a lengthy section. Chapter 18 has a lot going on. We had Yitro, who finally met up again with his son-in-law Moses, and he brought with him Zipporah and Gershom and Eliezer. They had a reunion. He had a Thanksgiving and a sacrifice, and then he gave some very good advice to Moses about being a judge, about being a leader, because Yitro was a priest, so was a leader of his own people, and then he had some good advice. Not the last time a father-in-law had advice for the son-in-law. So anyway, right.
You got that right.
That's right. And it's always welcome. It's always delightful. So as you're reading through this, and again, the classic approach would be, as Rashi would say, Mahakoshi, what's going on here? What's the difficulty? Why do we, what challenges us in this text? Because if a text was just given to us, and again, this is the whole Revelation Sinai, Shabbat. If the text is just given to us and we just have it and that's it, it's just the literal, just read it and understand it and do it, that's one thing. But that's never been our understanding of the text. First of all, the text was not given to us in written form. How did we get the text? How did Moses get the text?
Oral transmission.
Yeah, well, not just us, but Moses. It says, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, V'yomer Adonai, and God said to Moses, right? It didn't say V'yichtov Adonai, and God wrote, right? God didn't write anything. God had some kind of communication to Moses that Moses then somehow was able to perceive and understand, record to the best of his ability, the text, right? So when we are engaging with text, if we hear it as it's read, of course, from the Bima, but also as anything when it's oral. So if I get a text from someone, right? Someone sends me a text or an email, and you read on there a message. What's the process that we go through when you see that written text?
You interpret it.
Right. So you interpret it to the best of your ability, right? You look at the words and you can say, why they choose this word and not that word, right? Does it seem that there are some flowery approaches? There's some softness there? Is there a little humor there? Is there an aside there? Is there a different reference there? Or is it short? Is it terse? Is it direct? And so you only have what's written, and you're importing to it all of your questions and your thoughts. If someone picks up the phone and starts to talk to you, and they give you the same message, you have some other bits of information that go beyond the specific words. What other bits of information am I perceiving when I have a communication that's oral?
Voice inflection.
The attitude.
Right. The voice inflection. the rapidity with which they spoke, and can you hear humor in their voice, right?
Right.
Now, here's another one. If the phone is one thing, I can hear some words and I'm not really sure how they're taking it. Are they being facetious? Are they being cynical? Are they being coy? And so if I have the oral and I have the visual, I can see this person's punum and I can see their face. That adds yet another layer of information that helps me process the message, correct? When I have young students, I talk to them about because there's an age where you have a hard time perceiving exactly what this lesson's about interpreting words. And so for a young person, I put it to when you have a date, right? So if you have a date with someone, and at the end of the date, you can say, yeah, had a great time. Let's do this again. Or I had a great time. Let's do this again. Same words, totally different message, right? And some of them still get it and some of them don't, but that's their deal. We understand as adults the importance of the visual, of the oral, of the emotions that come through it. That's what we do as Jews, as a people from the beginning. We looked at this text that we receive in written form, because though we say, yes, it's as if we were at Sinai, yeah, but we're not at Sinai. We're at Temple Sinai or some other synagogue, and or over the screen, and we have this text in front of us, and we're reading it. And I can make it just words, I can make it just literal, but that misses everything. I have to infuse into those words the layers of meaning, the potential meaning. And that's what Midrash comes about to do. That's what the commentators are struggling with. What the heck was really going on here? And surprise, surprise, they don't always agree. They frequently say, no, it couldn't have meant that. It meant something else. And that's where we're at. So as you heard this text of Yitro coming back and talking to Moses, what are some of the things that piqued your interest and you go, we need to think about this a little bit deeper?
Just as you mentioned, Yitro, or the verse said, he came with Zipporah's sons, with her sons. They were his sons as well, I suppose.
Right. So her sons, yeah. So
Rabbi.
And specifically, and we'll get to that in a second, but specifically, why did you think about that?
Because if Moses and Miriam were husband and wife, I would assume that they were children of both.
Right. So he's applying, as a father-in-law might do, that Moses is being what?
Absent,
right? Moses is inattentive. You call yourself a daddy, you call yourself a father. Let me introduce you to your kids. Arnie, your turn. What else?
Just one comment on the Allen comment. Is that the basis, the background, tradition, that the mother's religion is the religion of the child? No. So in truth, no, that's not the basis for it.
That's not the basis for it at all. That doesn't come really. The earliest we have from the movement from patrilineal to matrilineal is with Ezra and Nehemiah on the return from Babylonia. The full matrilineal, i.e. that the child is Jewish only if its mother is Jewish, that only came post Second Temple, post destruction of the Second Temple. So that's right. That's not it. So what else? Go ahead.
Yeah, the second question I really had was, here's Moses, who's now giving instructions to the tribe, and he's the leader. He's basing his authority essentially on what God's telling him. Can't base it on lineage. Basically that's his authority. if one thinks in terms of where that evolved into church and state, and the Pharaoh was a god, others were God's anointed, others were, etc. What concerns me is, when did I guess, the people really never had a say in anything, but yet that is the underpinning of basically our legal system until generations and generations later.
Right.
I mean, nowadays, if you walked in and said, God told me this, and that's what we're going to do, somebody would reach for some authority.
Very good.
So it's interesting, because I'm not sure that historically it's nice to see that. But even in Judaica, way, way back, things about 3 judges and the Sanhedrin and all this and the rules came in. It wasn't a single man calling anything, or even his appointees. Here, people still had no say. He's appointing them.
Right. Good. Good. Welcome to Rabbi Zucker, who's with us as well. The one of the questions that they will bring up in the Midrashim is, what's the timing here? Because Yitro does a couple of things. One, he brings a sacrifice, and the laws of sacrifice are not given until the Torah. And 2, it details that he saw Moses adjudicating the cases based on the law. Well, he doesn't have the law yet. So they say, wait a minute, this passage right here, chapter 18, precedes chapter 20, where we get the 10 Commandments and some of the revelation. But theoretically, we don't really have the laws yet. So there's a term in the Talmud, throughout rabbinic literature, Ein mukdam me'ochar b'Torah. There's no before or after. There's no chronological in the Torah. So just because this is in chapter 18 and the 10 Commandments and the revelation is not until chapter 20, doesn't mean that revelation doesn't mean it came in that order. So they wrestle with, how could Yitro do any kind of sacrifice? And what laws is Moses adjudicating? And this gets to your point, Arnie, and that is that at what point then do the people know that this is reflecting of God and not just Moses willy-nilly? We don't have that. They didn't have that text there. And even still, what did they hear? What did the children of Israel witness at Sinai? We're going to get to that more on Thursday. So those are all wonderful points. A couple of other things, guys, if you had some questions, as we are about to look at some of the commentary, both from Rashi and Chazkuni and from Talmud as well. So who else has, as you read through this text, as Alan read through it, what other questions do you go? Go ahead, Barbara.
I am listening to what Arnold has said, but I see the beginning of our modern day court system.
Perfect.
Here. And that's what hit me the strongest, is that the major issues go to the higher courts and the minor issues go to lower courts, and the people decide, and eventually we're going to have juries and
Right.
and that whole process. It's amazing.
But who gave that to him? Did that come from Moses?
Well,
Yitro.
It came from Yitro.
Yitro, yeah.
Interesting, though, those who point out that, and Rabbi Zuck, if you want to weigh in on this, the Hammurabi, about 500 to 1,000 years before that, had something similar. He had laws posted, but he ascribed himself almost to a divine status. Now, are we seeing Moses elevating himself to somewhat of a divine status? Because when Yitro asks him, what the heck are you doing when the people are coming to you? He says, they come to me for the word of God. So
Yes.
it's almost as if he's elevating himself. Hammurabi most certainly did. And he put together what Hammurabi did, what we would refer to more of a constitution, i.e. if you have a problem, you go to this text, this code of Hammurabi, and from there you'll be able to adjudicate it correctly. Yitro then / Moses and our system took that to a greater level, i.e. we won't just have that text to make reference to, we will have judges and magistrates who will help us adjudicate those issues. That's really wonderful. Good. Anyone else? Well, with that, then let's get to our text. So this is from the very, very beginning that Alan just read, and it makes reference to Yitro as Moses' father-in-law, but Rashi makes us aware that, you know what, that there were other names as well for this man. So who would like to read what Rashi focuses on? Because again, one of the things, if you have a text, you want to say, wait a minute, they make reference to him as Yitro, as Chobab, as Ruel. Who is he? You know, we have all these names. Are they different people or the same person? Now, the modern scholar will say, well, these are different traditions that some editor later on wove together. Okay, but couple thousand years ago, they weren't ready to go there. They were looking at the fact that we might call each other. Well, once I might say that she's Barb, and sometimes I might say she's Barbara, or I can say this one's Arnie or Arnold, or you know what, Jerry, or what was your name the other day that at the restaurant? Jelly. Right? Why'd they call him Jelly? Right? So we have different names, sometimes called by different people. So who would like to read? Jerry, you're the name person. I got to get you.
All right, I'll do my best. He was called by 7 names: Ruel, Jether, Jethro, Hobab, Heber, Kene, and Putiel. He was called Jether from Yatar, to add, because he added. It was through him that there was added a section to the Torah, vis-a-vis that beginning at 21 FF. Moreover, thou shalt provide Jethro. So was he called, because he became a proselyte, and fulfilled the divine precepts. One more letter was added to his name.
Yeah. So instead of just Yiter, he became Yitro, because when he became a part of our people. He was also called Chobab. Go ahead and continue.
Hobab, because he loved Tibav, the Torah. Hobab is certainly identical with Chief Jethro, as it is said, Judges 4:11, of the sons of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and therefore it is correct to say that Hobab is one of his names. But as Reuel, there are some who say that he is not identical with Jethro, but that he was Hobab's, Jethro's father, as may be seen from Numbers 10:29. Then what, according to this view, would be the meaning of Exodus 2:18, and they came to Reuel, their father, from which it would appear that Reuel and Jethro are the same. It means that their grandfather, for children call their grandfather father.
Good. So the first thing that Rashi wanted to attempt to resolve was the fact that we have 3 distinct names for this person. How do we know it's the same person? And he seems to come on to the position that, well, no, Hobab and Yitro are the same person. Ruel is probably the grandfather. But of course, he acknowledges that there are differences of opinion. So this comes from Zvachim, from the Talmud. Who would like to? Barb, I gave you a call out earlier.
Okay.
You want to go by Barb or Barbara?
Barb is just great.
Okay.
The Gemara notes that the disagreement between Amoraim with regard to when Yitro came to Mount Sinai is like a dispute between Tanaim. The Torah states with regard to Yitro before he came to Mount Sinai. Now Yitro, the priest of Midian, Moses's father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, how Adonai had brought Israel out of Egypt. What tiding did he hear that he came and converted? Rabbi Yehoshua says he heard about the war with Amalek, as it is written adjacent to the verses that state that Yitro came and Joshua weakened Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword.
Good. So that happened in the following week. I mean, last week, at the very end of the Torah portion, in which we had the battle with Amalek, and it's from that then that, remember, Moses had his hands raised up, and the children of Israel confronted Amalek, and we were able to prevail. It is from that experience, and it was much more traumatic than what just the Torah talked about it in Exodus 17, because we have it again mentioned in Numbers, the book of Numbers, and again in chapter 25 of the book of Deuteronomy, where it says, Zechor v'lo tishkach, remember, do not forget. So whatever happened with Amalek was certainly quite traumatic. And so the Gemara is saying that, wait a minute, this is what prompted Yitro to come and want to join with our people. And I don't know if you would find that convincing or not, but that was certainly just one of the lines in the Talmud, saying that he was, I suppose, motivated by the fact that there was success. A, that Israel overcame Pharaoh. B, they overcame this incredibly vicious warrior tribe, the Amalekim. So anyone on that?
Well, what's interesting is that we have no problem with the fact that we call God by different names: Yud He Vav He, Elohim, El, Hamakom. We have all kinds of different words that we use. So it shouldn't surprise us that the rabbis pick up and say, oh, look at these different names for Jethro. They're just trying to explain the fact that yeah, there are different names, and that's fine. Right. I mean, all of us have different names. I mean, I'm who I am. I'm a brother, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, I'm a teacher, I'm a rabbi. So at different times, I have different roles to play, and that makes perfect sense.
Right. And our patriarchs and matriarchs, Abraham and Sarah started off as Avram and Sarai. So we're even used to the additional names. Barb, you had a question. You had a point.
When the people who were following Moses to the promised land, about how many different groups were there? These were not all Hebrews from what we're looking at right now.
Right. So for sure, we know that there was this group called the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude. And the text itself, the Talmud, the Torah itself doesn't identify exactly who they are. But that's what I was talking about, that when you have a written text, and that's all you have, and you know that it was first given orally and written down, it's up to us then to project. And so some of the comments is that, well, these were some of the others who were slaves. And others said that there were Egyptians who went out, and there were other oppressed people who went out. Some who were interested in following Moses and becoming a part of this children of Israel, and some were not. Some were just using their opportunity to get the heck out of there. And so it's up, as we look at any movement, we know that there are some who are purely into the ideology of the experience, and others who are just there because it's the happening, right?
Right.
And so there's a lot of room for interpretation there. What do you think?
Oh, I think there were multitudes of different types of people.
Yeah, I do. I agree too. And don't forget, we were a multitude of tribes. We might think, oh, children of Israel are all one big happy, and we sit around and have a nice Thanksgiving together. But no, the tribes themselves had centuries of bickering and differences of opinion. We just read last week how Deborah said, you know what? Some of you, Zebulun, you guys stood up and you fought with us, and good for you. But where the heck was Reuben? She calls him out, right? She gives him the business as to which tribes stood up and which tribes sort of faded into the woodwork. Let's get back to one of these other pieces here, which follows up with Yitro. This is from Midrash Tanchuma, and it has a very interesting piece. And then I'm going to quote then from an extended part from the second book of Chronicles. So can I have someone who will read this piece from Midrash Tanchuma?
I'll read.
Thank you.
Is that me?
Yes, go ahead, Alan.
Excuse me. Now Jethro heard, Exodus 18:1, some hear and lose their reward, while others hear and are rewarded. Joash
Mhm.
heard and lost his reward, just as it is said. Then the king hearkened unto him, but after that is written. So they executed judgment upon Joash. Similarly, the peoples have heard and they tremble. However, Yitro heard and was rewarded, though he had been an idolatrous priest. He joined Moses and entered under the wings of Shekinah.
The
Shekinah. For that he became worthy of adding the portion dealing with the judges to the Torah of Israel. When he told Moses, the thing that thou doesn't is not good.
So Yitro heard about what happened with Israel, joined Israel and blessed Israel, and was deemed so worthy that a part of the Torah is ascribed to him, especially the law about, as Barbara mentioned earlier, of adding judges and magistrates, etc. Now, they made this little reference in the Midrash to Joash. And so what was his, that he heard something, but he didn't get a reward. So I have an extended passage from a second book of Chronicles, because it's not something that we read very often, but I think you might find it interesting. Rabbi Zucker, will you read that?
Sure, but after the death of Jehoiada, the officers of Judah came bowing low to the king, and the king listened to them. They forsook the house of Adonai, God of their fathers, to serve the sacred posts and idols. And there was wrath upon Judah and Jerusalem because of this guilt of theirs. Adonai sent prophets among them to bring them back to him. They admonished them, but they would not pay heed. Then the Spirit of God enveloped Zechariah, son of Jehoiada the priest. He stood before the people and said to them, "Thus God said, why do you transgress the commandments of Adonai when you cannot succeed? Since you have forsaken Adonai, he has forsaken you." They conspired against him and pelted him with stones in the court of the house of Adonai by order of the king. King Joash disregarded the loyalty that his father Jehoiada had shown to him and killed his son. As he was dying, he said, "May Adonai see and requite it." At the turn of the year, when the army of Aram marched against him, they invaded Judah and Jerusalem and wiped out all the officers of the people from among the people, and sent all the booty they took to the king of Damascus. The invading army of Aram had come with but a few men, but Adonai delivered a very large army into their hands because they had forsaken Adonai, God of their fathers. They inflicted punishment on Joash. When they withdrew, having left him with many wounds, his courtiers plotted against him because of the murder of the sons of Jehoiada the priest, and they killed him in his bed. He died and was buried in the city of David. He was not buried in the tomb of the kings.
Well, it's not a passage that comes out easily. other than to look at the fact that just because you received a prophecy, or in this case, the words from a prophet, from Zedekiah, that that we have, or from a king, Zedekiah, that that could either be used as a benefit to add to your to your positive direction, or if you ignore it, it could be to your detriment. And certainly Yoash is used as that experience of, he heard this these words and ignored them, and of course, even though he had this great army and he thought, well, everything is perfect for me because I'm the most powerful, and that's not how it works. Getting back to where Yitro is, that he brought to Moses the son and Zipporah, etc. I'm with your wife and her 2 sons. Rashi, again, Alan Markman, this was to where you were saying earlier, we talked, that if you not come out for your own sake, if you're not coming out for my sake, at least come for the sake of your wife. And if you won't come out for your wife's sake, at least come for the sake of your two sons. So Rashi quoted Mechilta saying that he is looking at Moses, who is neglecting his fatherly duties, and by bringing them all together, he's hoping that Moses will be motivated to understand the role of family. I'm going to get to this a little bit more again on Thursday, and I hope you'll dig it. One of the things that God tells Moses is that, look, there's going to be a revelation tomorrow or soon, and therefore you and none of the rest of the children of Israel, and not even the herds or the flocks, no one should come close and touch Mount Sinai. You not come close to this mountain. Don't lay a hand on it, right? But what does Moses say? Moses says to the children of Israel, and we're going to get to this again on Thursday, we're going to have a revelation pretty soon, and no man should be with his wife for 3 days. But that's not what God said. God said no one should touch the mountain. And Moses added this whole level of, we should also separate conjugally from our spouses. And it's another example of Moses taking an oral commandment and expanding it for what purpose? And again, psychologically, we can ask ourselves, what problem does Moses have with women? I know, seriously, that he was I suppose he had some abandonment issues with his mother, perhaps, but it was women who saved him. First, Pharaoh's daughter saved him. His daughter, his sister Miriam, was able to get then his mother Yochebed to nurse him, and so. And it was Zipporah, his wife, who saved him from this angel at the time of the circumcision of his sons. So he, right after that incident with Zipporah and this circumcision passage in the Torah, which is fascinating, but confusing and weird, he separates from Zipporah and doesn't see her again until this moment. And so he obviously moving away from his family, from his wife. And right before the revelation, he says to all the rest of the men of Israel, you need to separate from your wives as well. David, you're shaking your head.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think we can understand it on a different level. And that is that if you do have sexual relations, you become impure in the sense that they regarded any kind of bodily fluids coming out as one was impure, and you had to then purify yourself. So the revelation is coming in a few days' time. So I want everybody to be ritually pure so that we in our bodies and in our minds, then we're ready then to accept the revelation. But
that's lovely with a couple of caveats. One, God doesn't tell him to do that. One. Two, we don't have the Torah with its laws of purity and emission upon which he could have based that opinion. That comes all from Moshe.
And Rabbi, as you said correctly, there is that wonderful line in the Talmud which says that linear time doesn't exist in terms of the Torah. That even though you find it in something in Leviticus, which hasn't been given as yet, nonetheless, Moses sort of had a heads up. He sort of knew what would be there.
Right.
So
well, that would work with Yitro interacting with Moses. That doesn't work with Moses preparing the children of Israel. We're about to get this revelation at Sinai. Don't touch Sinai. Don't touch your wives. There's no muqdam milcha there. There was absolutely, this is going to happen, and then that's going to happen. Anyway, so philosophers, ancient and modern, are wrestling with, why would Moses add to this text? Specifically, God saying one thing and expanding on it. It seems like Yitro also is challenging Moses on that as well. So this is that next passage where Moses does connect with his father-in-law. And so who would like to read? This is from Midrash Tanhuma. Anybody? Oh, Janet Bernitsky, come on.
Rabbi Eliezer maintained that the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moses, Moses, I am God who commanded the world to come into existence, and I am God who draws people near and does not keep them away. As it is said, am I a God near at hand, saith Adonai, not a God afar off, Jeremiah 23:23. I am God who brought Jethro near and did not keep him far off. And so when man comes to you to be converted, bring him near, do not keep him far off. Thereupon Moses went out to meet his father-in-law. Our sages say that Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and all the elders of Israel accompanied him. Hence it was said, the wise shall inherit the honor.
Right. So that when someone comes to say, I'm interested in converting, right? There's that old saying, and this is taken way too seriously by many people, that, well, the rabbi should rebuff that attempt 3 times, right? But the Talmud very specifically says, well, you want to make sure that this person is sincere, that they know what they're getting into, but you do that with your left hand, i.e. your weaker hand. But as you are cautioning with your left hand, draw them near with your right hand, bring them near with the stronger hand. And so the proof of the significance of that is, of course, with Yitro, who brought such significant blessings to bring him close so that he could attach himself to the Torah. I wanted to get to one other piece here down here as well. Again, these are related, one from Tanhuma, one from the Talmud Brachot. Who would like to read, who hasn't read yet? Lori Sorkin?
And Jethro rejoiced. Do not read this word as Vayihad, and he rejoiced, but rather Vayihed, and he became a Yehudi, a Jew. Why did Jethro say, blessed be Adonai? Jethro said, I have not neglected to worship any idol in this world, but I have found no God like the God of Israel. Yeah. Now I know that Adonai is greater than all the gods.
Right. So, and then a little earlier text, the Brachot, the Gemara said, go ahead.
With regard to the obligation to recite a blessing for a miracle, the Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? Rabbi Yochanan said, the verse states, and yet Jethro said, "Blessed be Adonai, who delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians." A blessing is recited for a miracle.
But the text then will continue saying, wait a minute, it's Yitro who says this blessing, not Moses, not Aaron, not Miriam, not the other 600,000 men and all the others. None of them said the blessing. It was Yitro who said it, and he wasn't even there at the time. He only heard about it. That's what the Sanhedrin and these other two passages in the Talmud, one from Sanhedrin and one from Zvachim, will go about. So who would like to read these two passages? Wendy, come on.
Okay. And Yithro said, "Blessed be Adonai, who has delivered you out of the hand of Egypt and out of the hand of Pharaoh." It was taught in the name of Rabbi Papias. It is a disgrace for Moses and the 600,000 adult men of the children of Israel, whom he led out of Egypt, that they did not say, "Blessed," until Yitro came and said, "Blessed be Adonai."
Right.
The Gemara asks.
Right. So again, back to this idea that it was someone who wasn't there, who wasn't of the people, who came with an appreciation of the depth of blessings from God. Now, this gets to that a conundrum that Rabbi Zucker and I were talking about. Which came first? How does he talk about sacrifices before there was Torah? So this is Zvachim, which is a Zevach is a sacrifice. Also a Talmudic passage.
The Gemara asks, but isn't it written before the giving of the Torah, and Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God? Since the word Zavachim, there is a referring to sacrifices, as the verse clearly states that Yitro took them for God. Evidently, peace offerings were sacrificed before the giving of the Torah. The Gemara answers, that verse was written with regard to the period after the giving of the Torah, when the Jewish people were permitted to sacrifice peace offerings. The Gemara notes, this works out well according to the one who says that the episode with Yitro was after the giving of the Torah. But according to the one who says that the episode with Yitro was before the giving of the Torah, what can be said? As it was stated, the sons of Rabbi Chaya and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi engage in a dispute concerning this issue. One says that the episode with Yitro was before the giving of the Torah, and one says that the episode with Yitro was after the giving of the Torah.
Right, good. So I know it may not strike you as that impactful, but if Yitro was before the Torah was given, then we can see his impact even on that revelation. A, the ritual as to how he conducted those sacrifices, and B, how he then instructs Moses how to set up the courts of law and to adjudicate these cases, and not to propose that Moses didn't hear from God, but rather heard from his father-in-law, which gets me to this wonderful old joke. So,
but Rabbi, there's another thing.
Well, let me finish my joke, and then you get it. So a young man comes and introduces himself to his intended parents, and says, I want to marry your daughter. I want your blessing. And the father said, well, what do you do for a living? And he said, well, God will provide, right? Said, well, God will provide. Well, what do you how do you propose then to support my daughter? She's used to fine things. You know, I've treated her like a princess. And he says, God will provide. And then he says, well, wait a minute. You don't have prospects. You don't have a job. Do you have any kind of assets that can help the family? And he looks at him, he says, God will provide. So the father goes back to the kitchen and tells his wife, well, I met with him. He's a nice boy. And the wife said, well, does he have a job? Does he have any assets? Does he have any prospects? He said, well, no, he doesn't have any of those things. So on one hand, he doesn't seem to be much of a catch. On the other hand, he thinks I'm God.
Very nice. Very nice.
I had to do it. Sorry, David. I had to jump in there. So Yitro would not be the last father-in-law to play the godly provider. Go ahead.
Right. Just two points. One is that just even logically, Yitro was a priest, and so he had his own traditions, and he brought a sacrifice, could well have been out of, it's not like people didn't have laws and didn't have traditions before the revelation. That's one point. The second point, and I'll try and keep this short, that the Torah says that there were 600,000 men plus wives plus children. Now, just doing some quick mathematics, if you say each man gets a wife plus a couple of kids, you're up to 2.5 million people. Nobody moves anybody with that number of people. So instead, if one regards, it says 600 elef. Now, elef can be the word thousand, or it can also be unit. So and many of us believe that there were 600 units, 600 families maybe, including women and children. And that would then be like 2,500 people. Now, 2,500 people you can move. It's not easy, but you can move that kind of numbers. And so it wasn't all that huge number of people who left Egypt and were in the desert for 40 years. It was probably, roughly speaking, 2,500 people. And then if you view that, then all that takes place makes much, much more sense. So just to bear that in mind.
Good. Yeah, and that's a wonderful point, and it's been expressed. Is it a family unit? Is it more like a brigade, or are we talking about 2,300 people, or is it 23,000 people? Regardless, the numbers are can be played with. What we have to understand is that the numbers are besides the point. What the Torah wants us to know is that there was a revelation, there was an experience, there was a coming together of our family. Yoni, you texted something I didn't get to see. What were you sharing?
Oh, I was just asking if Melchizedek of Shalem is another example of a priest who sacrificed to the God of Abraham. And then I included a midrash that I heard as I was getting kicked out of a Chabad house for making
that's mentioned in Genesis 14.
Right, exactly.
You're absolutely right.
Right. No, that's a very good point. And so again, that there is a sense that our faith, our people, our discovery of our relationship with God and the world has been informed and blessed by people of different faiths and cultures. And that's a major point for us to think of as well, that when we have people join us, it's something where we can celebrate on the highest of level, where people come from with their experiences and their blessings. Arnie, you had a piece.
Just a quick question, because I know this came up in a previous session. Did we ever decide on who the Jews were giving, Israelites were giving sacrifices to before the Exodus? Remember, Moses sends them out, or goes to Pharaoh and says, I need them 3 days in the desert to sacrifice. To who? Right. So the concept of the sacrifice obviously have borrowed from somebody else.
Right. So, right, you're 100% correct. And certainly within Egypt as well, in other cultures, they had sacrifices. It's not even sure, was Moses just saying, we're going to go and we're going to have some kind of experience here. But it's not like they didn't know from sacrifices. That was the only way in which people in the ancient world celebrated their relationship to a god. They they provided food for the gods. In Judaism, it wasn't, well, God doesn't need another roast beef, right? God is not looking to be fed. But we are giving parts of this sacrifice to say that everything belongs to God and not to us. Let me get real quick to the concluding piece here, because I know that some of you are going off to this next class. So at the very conclusion, I wanted to get to Cheskuni, that the I don't know if I want to get to that one. Let's get to Rabbi Yishmael. So, and Moses sent his father-in-law. Rabbi Yishmael said he sent him with gifts, and i.e. Moses sent his father-in-law gifts. And Rabbi Eliezer Hamode said he sent him with all the honor in the world, as is seen in Moses' response to him, as it is written in the book of Numbers. I pray you, do not leave us, telling him, you gave us good and beautiful counsel, and Adonai consented to your words. I pray you, do not leave us. And Yitro replied, is a candle a benefit other than in a place of darkness? Can the sun and the moon benefit from a candle? You are like the sun, and Aaron, your brother's like the moon. What can I, a candle, do between you? Let me go to my land, and I'll convert all of my countrymen and bring them to the study of Torah and under the wings of the Shekhinah. One might think that he went, but did not do so. It is therefore written, and the children of Kenny, the father-in-law of Moses, went up from the city of the date palms and that Jericho. They went and they settled with the Torah, and the people, signifying wisdom in this instance, Torah study. I.e., yes, Yitro did return to his people. The Kenites then attached themselves to our people. So the good deed of welcoming, of realizing not just, oh, we are doing you a favor by welcoming, but rather we acknowledge the blessing that you are bringing, that we are elevated because of you, that then adds to the strength and the welfare of all of those who will come after us, because we will have expanded our family and our faith, and acknowledgement that each person that comes to us adds their heart, their spirit, and we have to open our arms and welcome them. Alan, you had a hand. You have to unmute them real quick.
Just one comment. These things that Moses commanded that were not commands from God, that puts me in doubt of this true humility of Moses.
You know, these are the questions that we wrestle with, because the text is no longer Moses' text. The text is our text, right? We have to look at it. And we also have to understand that just as Moses had to interpret what he experienced from God and give it to the children of Israel, so too in every generation have we done the same. We have looked at the text and we have applied the principles, the ethics, the morals, and tried to help inform our lives. We've done through She'elot Teshuvot, through Responsa, through these questions that apply the ethics and the morals to our modern day experiences. Are we playing God? Hopefully we will have enough ability to say that no, what we are coming up with is not divine, and yet it's our attempt to try to take what was significant and apply it meaningfully to our world. And so that's what Moses did. That's what we do. That's why at the end of the day, what we do when we're reading text, we're making it our own. And the perspectives that we have, the arguments that we have, the different pieces that we add to it, that too then has become a part of the revelation. All of the Torah was not given at Sinai. The Torah is still being given, and you get to experience it, add to it, think about it, discuss it, have dialectic with it, dialogue with it, argue with it, and make it your own. And that's why the Torah is so extraordinary, because it is this vehicle that transcends time and place and invites each one of us in this generation and those who to come to make it our own, to wrestle with it, to struggle with it, and never be satisfied that we have had the last word. We won't have the last word. That's for our father-in-law. or our wives or whatever. Anyway, good. So with that, I know that some of you are taking off for other classes. Thank you, guys. I hope to see you. It's going to be a pretty cool class. We talk about Revelation.